to share my screen. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, why isn't it moving forward? Here we go. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to go ahead and give the medical disclaimer. The information provided is for educational purposes. It's not intended for medical advice or a substitute for medical advice of a physician or qualified healthcare personnel. We do not aim to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any illness or disease. And you should always consult with your doctor or other healthcare professional for medical advice or information about diagnosis and treatment. Of course, this information in this presentation has not been evaluated by the FDA or any other medical body. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this world. This is Dr. Dori Narbo, and I'm your host on today's call. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a clinical researcher and an author of several books. So welcome to the call, everyone. Hello, Clayton.
Happy Tuesday. I'm
Hey.
excited to see what we're doing today.
Oh, yes. Well, so let me just introduce you really quickly for those that don't know you. I'm sure
Please
everybody on
brief.
this. Okay. So Clayton has over 25 years of experience in the health and wellness area industry, and he is an entrepreneur in the healthcare industry. Has developed several business models for analytical testing to improve the quality of care by identifying risk factors for diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. So his philosophy is simple: cure the cause.
Yes, thank you. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome in 2013, and it was, interestingly, it was very shortly after I'd had some of my teeth removed, and those teeth had, I suspect, had some amalgam fillings in them. And I actually asked this question before starting with Clean Slate, and I think it was Clayton who identified that that was probably the cause of my chronic fatigue syndrome starting. Prior to that, I had already had adrenal fatigue for, gosh, probably 15 years or so. But it really got very serious in 2013 when I actually got a formal diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. And it was so bad that I had to sell my business. I couldn't carry on with the business anymore. I was really virtually excuse me, virtually bedridden. I would do an hour of gardening and then have to be in bed for 6 hours, and then couldn't do anything really much for the next week or so. So it was really quite bad. And when I had to sell my business, that was like a wake-up call. I thought there's something wrong here. So I went to the doctor, just got the usual sort of brush offs from them. There's nothing we can do for you. All your blood tests are normal. There's nothing we can do until you have blood tests that show something. And of course, the blood tests were always normal. And I have had hundreds of blood tests, and it's every month or every 2 months, it's a different thing. It might be this, it might be that, and so on and so on. It carried on. But basically, things were just getting worse and worse until eventually I decided that I wasn't getting any help from the medical profession. I'd have to take control of this myself and kind of start healing myself. So I set about changing my diet and doing the usual kind of thing, you know, taking lots of supplements, and I take an awful lot of supplements. But I got to the point where I just had that last 10 or 15% of wellness that I couldn't achieve. You know, I'd got so far and I got myself back into full-time work, but I still had that last bit of struggle. I still wasn't 100% well. And I actually had to ask them at work, I had to negotiate a change of working hours because I wasn't coping very well with the early mornings and, you know, long hours and not taking enough breaks and so on. So I negotiated a later start in the morning. But, you know, and then Sandy said to me, he'd been on Clean Slate for, I think, a couple or 3 months, and he started talking to me about it and telling me about the amazing results he was having. And one thing that really attracted me to it was that he said it was decalcifying his pineal gland. And that, as you know, is, you know, that kind of sharpens the intuition, and it gives you more clearer focus and all that kind of thing. So I started on Clean Slate, and almost immediately I noticed more energy. But the biggest, I can actually relate to everything that all of the previous three speakers have said. Almost everything that they've said are things that I've had, apart from the psoriasis. I haven't had psoriasis, but the liver issues, skin problems. My skin issues really have come from food sensitivities, and I've only recently discovered that actually the reason those food sensitivities present themselves in my skin is because of liver issues. So I've started to think, what can I do about dealing with my liver issues? But I've noticed that since taking Clean Slate, a lot of my food sensitivities have started to disappear. So that is a major thing for me, because food sensitivities really control my life. It limits where I can go, what I can eat, who I can be with, how much I can travel. You know, it's just a really big issue in my life, food sensitivities. So I've noticed that, for example, histamine intolerance has gone. I don't have, my doctor said to me, you can never eat strawberries again in your life, because you have a, you know, because at one point I was getting a histamine kind of reaction to strawberries and various other foods, fish and various things, but I don't get any of that anymore now. I was actually eating strawberries earlier today, and normally my lips would have been swollen and I would have had all of the itching and everything else, but I've got none of that now. The other thing that Marsha was saying, and I think I'd got to this point where I started to think, and friends of mine actually said to me, I think you've got ADHD. And I was saying, no, I've never had ADHD. That's not a thing for me. What it feels like is exactly how Marsha was saying, and Django was saying, it feels like your thoughts are just really chaotic. And I really struggle to focus and concentrate, especially at work. It would take me a whole day to finish my work, and to not even finish my work, and then I'd have to stay late. I'd have to stay an hour or two late in the evening just to finish that day's work. And now, like today, I finished all my work by 4:30, and I was ready. I started getting ready for this meeting and started thinking, you know, getting my notes ready and everything, because all my work was done. But it used to feel like, I used to describe it like ants, having ants in my head, ants going all over the place. It's like signals firing off in all different directions. And all of that is now completely gone. So I have a much more calm and focused way of dealing with things. So I'm not getting so anxious and stressed and panicky about things. People used to say to me, you're so highly strung. And I'd say, well, that's because of the way my brain works, you know. And now it's like the ants have gone. It's the best way I can describe it, is the ants nest in my head with ants going all over the place. They've all gone. Another thing that was mentioned, I think in Dory's slide, was about eyesight. Now, I know I'm still wearing my glasses today, but I got to the stage where I was like this on the screen. It was like my lenses were fogged up the whole time. There was no clear, no matter how much I cleaned the lenses, I still couldn't see clearly, and it was getting worse. And I started to get these little black spots in front of my eyes. And so when I researched that, I went onto YouTube and watched a lot of videos, and everyone was saying this is because of debris in the eyes and toxic buildup. And I was thinking, well, how do you clean that up? So I started doing eye exercises, and I've been doing eye exercises for about a year to try and get the muscles to work better, to improve the blood flow. But it only got me so far. There was a slight improvement, and my optician noticed an improvement, but it wasn't enough for me to say, right, I don't need my reading glasses now. I can see clear. I don't have that. It was the kind of like almost like a film across my eyes. And earlier today, I was thinking, actually, I noticed that that's completely gone. I'm actually looking at the screen quite normally, and I'm not trying to clean my glasses every few minutes, because it feels like there's some kind of dirt or film on the lenses. That's all gone. I've got a list here of probably about 20 or 30 different things improvements that I've noticed. But another thing I've noticed, this is really interesting, Clayton, you might have some comments on this. On my sort of the top of my leg on my hip, I've noticed this sort of around, like a patch of rough skin coming up, and I've noticed it there. And when I took a close look at it, I could notice little spots, red spots all the way around. It's a round, like a round mark with little red spots all the way around. And then I remembered that when in the 60s, when I had my vaccinations, and I can't tell you exactly if it was polio or smallpox or what it was, they used to do, at that period in time, they did them on the leg instead of on the arm. So I got mine on the leg, and I suddenly made the connection. I thought, even in those days, they probably used heavy metals in the vaccinations. And this is the clean slate now pushing all that stuff out, which is why I don't know if I'm right in that assumption, but I'm assuming that to me, this is proof that all those heavy metals and all that rubbish that they put in vaccinations and everything that we put into our bodies, all of that is now coming out. Yeah, another thing I said to Sandy as well, I said, I feel like I've got my old personality back. It's like I used to have to really try to control my moods, and I had to really control my diet so carefully that I didn't eat the wrong thing because, and Clayton, I don't know if you remember, I asked this question before I started as well. Would it affect my copper levels? Because I suffer a lot with copper toxicity, copper overload. And I was really, really concerned that taking Clean Slate would release too much copper and put too much free copper into my system, and I would start getting all those copper effects again. But none of that's happened. So anyway, I'm sorry I've been talking so much.
Not dead yet.
2 minutes. No, I'm not. The thing that I was most concerned about was that my copper levels would be disturbed, but that hasn't happened. So I'm really, honestly, I'm so happy. I'm so happy with the progress I've made. All these different things, little niggly, my knee pain has gone. My back injury that I struggled with for 2 years has finally properly healed. Do you know, it's just a long list of lots of different things like this. So. But the eyesight improvement that I noticed today, that's been really major. And the biggest thing for me was focus and concentration at work, so that I can actually do my work during the day and finish in time, and I don't have to stay late to finish because it was so difficult for me to concentrate on what I was doing during the day.
So you're getting,
sorry.
getting a question of how long have you been doing this, and have you only been doing 4 drops twice a day?
I'm still only on 4 drops twice a day, and I'll tell you the reason for that in a minute. But I started on Clean Slate on the 5th of September. So it's about 2 months, but I had a week's break in between because I was on holiday and I ran out and I couldn't get the order in and so on. So probably all in all about 7 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks. Yeah, getting on for 7 weeks now.
So the 5th of November will be 2 months. So remember
Yeah.
the 5th of November.
From the 5th of September to the 5th of November, it will be.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's just, I honestly, I'm hoping, you know, like Mark with all his bottles and lotions and potions, I've got a whole box full of supplements and things I take. And I'm hoping eventually I'll be able to ditch at least half of those, if not more. You know, if this, especially with my liver thing, because a lot of my issues seem to be related to the liver. And I was so happy to hear what Tommy said earlier about, you know, about the improvement in his liver, because that's the one thing because that will help with my food sensitivities. Another thing that's gone, that's a really major issue for people with chronic fatigue syndrome, is multiple chemical sensitivity. It's called MCS. Dora, you probably heard of that. MCS, it's quite common, but I've noticed that I haven't had any MCS for probably a couple of weeks now.
So would you equate that not to multiple chemical sensitivities, but do you think you could equate it to just a toxic overload?
Yeah.
And your body can't handle anymore and you're in chaos.
Definitely. And you become because you've got so many toxins in you, you become hypersensitive to any toxin in the environment. So, for example, I couldn't sit on a bus or a train near somebody who was wearing strong perfume. And now, just recently, when I've been on the tram, it just hasn't bothered me. And I've been known sometimes to get up and move to a different part of the train or the tram if somebody's got strong perfume on. because that chemical that chemical smell is just too overpowering, and it actually causes me to feel physically nauseous. But I'm fine with that now. You know, I haven't noticed any of that recently.
So I've got a couple things I wanted to ask you about. One, the hip aspect
Yes.
is your body pushing stuff out? Not it, and it's the fun part with Clean Slate, with how Clean Slate works as a mechanism, but also how it allows the body to start doing what it wants to do. And
Yeah.
I had some information or an experience with that with one of my closest friends. We've been friends since kindergarten and preschool. But he had contracted poison oak many years ago. And a few years ago, he was on a flight, and because of the air travel, which is a whole other conversation we'll get into at some point, because we're starting to do some really cool stuff with some from people that work in the airline issue that have been poisoned. But so he took about 30 drops before he got on the plane. And then when he landed, he noticed that he had a rash on his leg. And he called and is like, "Am I having an allergy to using this?" I'm like, "No, it doesn't cause allergies. What do you have?" And he started to explain it just like you were talking about. And then he realized that the exact same location and the exact same look was what he had when he contracted poison oak from going for a walk in the woods. And when he had gone to the doctor, he went to the emergency room to get treatment for him. They told him there was nothing they could do, and he just needed to let it go away. Well, all of those biotoxins seeped into his skin where they were stored there, and as the body pushed it back out, he had the same response again as it cleared.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting to see those function. The other thing is you love strawberries, right?
Yes.
The Environmental Working Group has them as part of their Dirty Dozen. They are one of the most toxic fruits because of even with organic fruits. And it's the hard part, right? Is we find some things that we really like, and they start adding to our body burden. But now, and it's like, for me, there are foods I love that I know are horrible for me. But it's like you talked about, if you know what your body's going to do with them, you can accept it. And you say, okay, if I do this, I'm going to get this outcome, but I can clean up some of the mess. And yeah, so congratulations on the short journey so far. Here's a question for you.
Thank you.
So it's you've had this list of experiences so far. How many bottles have you used?
I'm on my second one, and I'm not even halfway through the second one yet.
And Mark
I've got.
Going, come on, man.
That's my list of all the things I wrote down. I was going to talk about all of them, but I don't think you guys want to stay here for another hour with me. Look, just one thing I wanted to say about the hip thing. Where that vaccination thing has come out, I've had some kind of problem with it's on my left hip, and I've had a problem with my left hip for probably 20 years, as long as I can remember. And I've been to biomechanics specialists, I've been to physiotherapy specialists, I've been to the doctor. They've given me special insoles to wear. They've told me my pelvis is crooked. They've told me my hip isn't straight. It's this, that, and the other. All those sort of things to try and control the hip pain. And they did work somewhat, but every now and then my hip would, and I tell you, the biggest problem I have with this hip is when I'm sleeping. If I sleep in just a slightly off position, then I'll have hip pain the next day. And now that all of this is coming out, I'm thinking, it's probably the toxins that went in at that site that have gathered in my hip and in the hip bones and in the hip joint and everything that's causing this discomfort and the pain. Because another thing that's happened is the soles of my feet were going very numb. And it got to the point where it felt like my skin was about that thick, because I literally couldn't feel anything on the bottom of my feet. And now slowly that's all coming back. But as it's coming back, I can feel the nerves coming back alive and becoming more sensitive. So I'm thinking that's probably hopefully what's going to be happening with my hip.
It's called peripheral neuropathy from environmental toxins, which is the primary cause. But I think the easy way to say that is Sandy helped you eliminate a pain in your arse. And I'm I'm going to leave it at that because I have to, I've got to get
You're
on
late.
the other
You're late
webinar.
on the next call.
I'm sorry, I've kept you.
Usually, we'll leave it at this. Usually, Sandy is a pain in the arse.
Oh,
But now he's eliminating them. No,
no, he's
you
not.
guys. Thank you everyone.
Sandy's been a very
feedback.
good friend to me, always.
Yeah, no, and that's the fun part of the best way to help create friends is through sharing, right?
Yeah.
And sharing the love.